I've played just under 10 hours of Fae Farm, and whilst this is most definitely not a review because I am nowhere near done with the game, today I'll not only be sharing my first impressions of the game, showing more gameplay footage of both PC and Nintendo Switch, but also telling you why I've fallen absolutely head over heels for Fae Farm so far. And a huge thank you to Fae Farm for giving me early access to make this video. For those who don't know, Fae Farm is a fantasy farming sim releasing on September 8th. And even though I've played a ton of farming sims recently, the thing that really caught my eye when I watched the trailer was that magic is infused into every farming sim aspect of the game. Be that the magical creatures you look after, the special fertilizer you can cover your crops in to give them a chance to change, or the mines filled with animated forgotten objects that you need to battle. And even your classic farming sim tools are infused with magic when you upgrade them. Now, as you guys know, there are a lot of farming sims that have either just released or are coming in the month of September. However, for me, this addition of magic was just enough to shake up the typical farming sim format that I was completely and utterly hooked. And despite the fact that I thought I knew everything I needed to know about Fae Farm going into it, even in the first 10 hours alone, the game had plenty of pleasant surprises for me. Fae Farm starts off with you finding a letter in a bottle telling you that the world of Eeowna needs your help. So naturally, you set sail in order to try and find it. And after successfully making it there, you get given a plot of land and a house and set off to explore the fantasy world, which, by the way, is absolutely stunning. For me personally, I just love the character of the town and a few little things the devs threw in to make it feel alive. Like, for example, when you go through the town square, you'll be able to hear characters chit-chatting. And if you're out farming late at night, you can even kind of hear your tools echoing. But one thing I didn't know about was Eeowna has different regions. So far, I've come across a spooky region, which not only had scary looking trees, but also had mushrooms and nuts for you to collect. But there's also a frozen area on the map as well. Now, this is an area you can't just run into without having prepared. Much like the likes of Breath of the Wild, going into cold or hot areas will have an effect on your health. And whilst I haven't fully figured out how to enter them yet, I know it's either going to be by potions or by making select foods. But to me, the best part of exploring Eeowna was the fact that there are no invisible walls. You can literally jump off and over anything you can see on the map. So for example, you want to take a shortcut by jumping off the edge of a cliff and going into the river, go for it. If you want to jump over a fence to get somewhere else, that's also totally fine. You can travel however you feel. And to make the town feel even more alive, there are plenty of NPCs running about, going about their daily life. One thing I particularly loved about the entire town was that the shops don't have an opening and closing time. They're literally open whenever you're awake. And although the game doesn't have a mini-map, it does have a really nice feature where you can kind of mark any NPC you need to find, and it will direct you straight towards them. I personally love that feature because there's nothing worse than running around an entire town trying to find a single NPC. And on top of all of this, from what I've seen so far, there is at least 3 different mines, or as they call them, dungeons, to go explore. Now, the start of the game is kind of similar to any other farming sim. It's basically just a tutorial. Although I must admit, this didn't feel too long compared to some other farming sims I've played, and it will teach you all the basics of your day-to-day life in Eeowna. This includes bug catching, which I personally really enjoyed, as it will actually give you a little cloud around the bug if you're close enough to catch it. There's also fishing, which is kind of a mix between the Animal Crossing mechanics and Coral Island mechanics. But the best part about it is there's a toggle that allows you to turn on easy fishing mode that completely gets rid of this minigame if it's not your vibe. You can also care for magical animals, which is pretty much the same as every other farming sim. You can feed them, pet them, and let them out, making sure they're happy each and every day. And then there's your classic farming and foraging, which I must admit felt particularly easy and smooth in Fae Farm. And the reason for this is that your scythe, your axe, your watering can, and pickaxe are actually all the same tool, because the game will auto-switch between all of these tools depending on what you're trying to do. And although this is such a small thing, not having to toggle between all of your tools actually made such a difference. Farming was also incredibly streamlined. Like, instead of hoeing, you actually use this craft menu to make little plots for your crops. And if you have any empty farming plots, it will actually automatically bring the seeds up for you, which when you've planted them, it will then bring up the watering can, making the farming sim experience just feel all that more enjoyable. I think for me, the biggest thing that makes this stand out against other farming sims were the mines or the dungeons. I find in most of the farming sims I've played so far, combat is typically the weakest, or for me at least the least enjoyable. But I actually had such a great time in the mines. It kind of has a similar idea to the likes of Sunhaven. You go in, you can collect resources until you find a button that opens the next door to the next floor. But once you leave the mines, you can craft these things called seals using the resources that you collected to permanently open floors and allow you to fast travel between whichever floors you've opened. And although there is combat, it wasn't necessarily difficult. It was engaging enough that it was fun, but not so difficult that I had a hard time clearing the floors. Thankfully, you can go and buy healing potions anyway, and one thing I really liked about being in the mines is if your stamina or your health got low, it gave you a pop-up where all you'd have to do is press one single button and you will consume either a potion or a bit of food, so you don't have to go into the menu and click what you want to eat or what you want to drink to save your health. And the best part about the combat is it's only going to get more fun later on when you start unlocking more spells. Now, it was only really when I hit the 10 or so hour mark that I got my first spell to use in the mines, but I just know it's going to make the game even more enjoyable. So after 10 hours, this is how my farm is looking. So all my spring crops are growing over here, and here you can see all my flowers. One cool thing that I didn't know was in the game is flower breeding. I'm not doing a very good job here because I had a quest to do flowers, so I kind of just ignored it. But theoretically, you can crossbreed plants. Over here, I have my chickens, or should I say singular chicken. And this right here is my processing area. So we can make beverages, we can make the seals. You've got ore over here, you've got the ability to make wooden planks here, and many more things. And there's even more that I haven't unlocked yet. If you go down to the build menu, you can kind of see it here as to how much stuff I've still got left to go. But I think the part I really haven't touched on is decorating. Now, as you can see, you've got loads of different types of fences. You've got different types of rugs and paths as well. And here's the decorating items I have so far, but as you run around your island and discover new areas, you also unlock more recipes, so this definitely isn't every single recipe in the game. So that's everything you can do in Fae Farm. Let's talk about the story. Now, as I said, I'm not really that far through. I'm only 10 or so hours at this point. So for me, the story was a kind of mix between tutorial type stuff and some minor things across the town to try and help it. Like, for example, destroying the brambles across the paths, investigating into the whirlpools that are surrounding the island, and also investigating things like the mines. And the nice thing about the quests is not only does it give you a purpose to your farming, but it also kind of teaches you more about the town, its people, and its history. But so far, I definitely feel like it's laying the foundations of the story itself. But the best part to the story for me is it just kind of gave me a purpose to my everyday farming sim life. Like, for example, one quest had me try and reach the bottom of the mines, another quest got me to do the equivalent of a bundle, which basically had me use every aspect of farming sim life. And alongside the main quest, there are also a ton of small quests to do as well for the townspeople. So I always felt busy, but not in an overwhelming way. Because although the game doesn't let you control the day length, there's no punishment for not going home at the end of each day. At midnight, wherever you are, the day just ends. And all that happens is you're sent back to your house. That's it. You don't lose stamina, you don't wake up late, there is zero punishment. You just effectively wake up in your house, and then you can run and carry on whatever you were doing after you got all the money for your day's work. I think the thing that really stood out to me was how easy this was to play for a long period of time. I didn't really find any aspects of the gameplay frustrating, and that's kind of rare for me in a farming sim. Because the closest I got to being frustrated was the fishing, but then again, you can literally just turn on the easy fishing mode and not have to deal with that. And I love the fact that the fun in Fae Farm doesn't come from the difficulty. It comes from the exploration and the ability and the fun that comes alongside completing different quests and moving the overall story forwards. And the best part is, I really have barely touched the surface of Fae Farm so far. Like, for example, later on, I know you get wings in the game. You also get more spells and more magic that you can use. I've also only been in the starting town, and I know for a fact there's more than one town. I haven't figured out how to enter the frozen area of the land yet, and I know there are more mines, more houses that I can own, and also more towns to go and explore. I haven't even met my future wife in the game yet. I have no idea where she is, but she's nowhere to be seen yet, and that makes me even more excited to see what's to come. Now, as you've seen throughout this video, I've been flicking between some PC footage and some Nintendo Switch footage. So let's talk about it. Now, whilst I don't think the Nintendo Switch looks bad whatsoever, I think this should clearly show the difference between the Switch and the PC, which, by the way, this is the graphical settings on the max. To me, the biggest difference though is actually your own character's face, which admittedly you don't see much, but it kind of makes it obvious because the Nintendo Switch version looks a lot less crisp. Now, loading scene-wise, I didn't see much of a difference between the two, and on the Nintendo Switch, I didn't really see much of a difference between handheld or docked either. But there were definitely a few moments where the Nintendo Switch version chugged a little bit, which I didn't see so much on the PC version. However, it is important to note that the game is probably going to get patched before day one on the Nintendo Switch. So there's a chance some of this will be changed before then. I think for me, the biggest thing that was a problem is just the lack of a mini-map. And whilst you can set waypoints to help you go around and fast travel, it did take me a little bit of time to learn. But so far, I've had a great time. I can't wait to get further and fully review the game. I'm also going to be streaming Fae Farm over the next couple of weeks, so make sure you subscribe for that. And if you want to hear all about the many cozy games coming out in September, click this video here.